Hello and welcome to LSE Focus. It is pre-match build-up show time for Liverpool's do or die final game of the Champions League group stage this season against Napoli on Tuesday night. And if you are in any way confused about the permutations, the short version of it, Liverpool have to get a pretty decent result. However, the long version of it, which I will go through for all of you who aren't entirely clear, because it does get a little bit complicated and it does sometimes depend on results elsewhere as well. So it's all going to get a little bit confusing, but I'll try and make it as easy as possible to understand. Essentially, Liverpool are currently third in the group. Napoli are first on 9 points. PSG are second on 8 points, we've got 6, and then Red Star Belgrade are behind us on 4. And essentially, if we want to guarantee qualification tomorrow on Tuesday night, regardless of what happens in the other game between PSG and Red Star, we either have to win by 1-0, which would put us level on Napoli, like on the head-to-head between us, and therefore ahead of them on, I believe it's goals scored. However, if they score, because of what I think is the away goals rule, which comes into play in head-to-head, I'm doing these kind of gestures to make it all clearer, like big fish, little fish, cardboard box kind of stuff. But anyway, if they score because of the away goals rule that comes into the head-to-head, we then have to win by 2 clear goals. So essentially, an easier way to think about it is just that this is a knockout game where we lost the first leg away from home 1-0. I'm thinking like the Europa League semi-final against Villarreal, which was exactly the same kind of situation where we win 1-0 and in that case it goes to extra time. In this case, we just go through. However, if they score, it's an away goal and we then have to win by 2 clear goals. So either of those results would see us through regardless of what happens in the other game. A draw or a loss, again, regardless of what happens between PSG and Red Star, would see us dropped out of the competition and potentially, unless Red Star win their game against PSG, into the Europa League, i.e. the doldrums of European football. But if PSG apparently either lose or draw, and I'm a bit sceptical about that because of the way the table stacks itself up, then apparently a win would be good enough to actually see us through, regardless of whether we get it by any number of goals. And potentially, should PSG draw or lose, we might even actually top the group and become one of the top seeds going into the knockout. So essentially, it's the exact same situation we had all those years ago against Olympiacos, where we conceded, I think, right at the end of the first half, and then scored 3 second-half goals, including an absolute Roy of the Rovers belter from Steven Gerrard to see us through to the knockout stages. And I don't need to remind you how that Champions League campaign ended, because it is, of course, etched into Liverpool history forever. And this is a potential night that could end up going down in Liverpool history. I think there's been a lot of talk over how big this game is exactly, and a lot of fuss from certain people about whether we do like a coach greeting for the game, whether we do all the songs outside the ground, or whether we just get in as early as possible and try and create the atmosphere. Personally, I don't have a huge opinion either side. I mean, this is provided my ticket arrives tomorrow, and that's another thing I won't get into too much, but I am essentially fingers crossed, toes crossed, absolutely everything crossed that my ticket for the game does arrive in the mail, because if not, I'll be watching it in front of the telly rather than on the cop, and those are two very, very different things. But because this is my first like big European night, I did go to the Red Star game as well. I'd quite like a coach greeting just because I want to know what they're like, but I can also kind of see the point of people saying we should save them for the knockout stages and stuff like that. If you ask me, just go to the match and do whatever you want. If you want to start lighting flares at 4 in the afternoon and singing LA, 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 and, you know, shouting at the Napoli coach, do it. If you want to get into the ground at 7 o'clock and start the songs in there early, do it. Just do whatever makes you happy and whatever you think will help you get behind the team more and get the best possible result for Liverpool, because atmosphere is going to be crucial in this game. We are going to have to need it to be one of the big Anfield European nights, because Napoli are some pretty good opposition. I'll come on to them a little bit later, but Liverpool are going to need the fans to keep them going, because like I said, if Napoli score at any point, if they start to get a foothold in the game, it could become a real struggle, and the players might feel like, you know, as fantastic as they are, they haven't quite got enough in the tank to get past Napoli and get the result we need. But if the fans stay on the players' backs all the way through the game, if reinforcing the idea that they can do it, that the weight of history will push them forward rather than hold them back, then they've got every chance to actually sort of rise above and become what they never believed they could be and get what could be a fantastic result for Liverpool. So whatever you do before the game, whether you show up 5 minutes before or 5 hours before. Just make as much noise as you possibly can and make sure those players believe that they can make this another special Anfield European night. So team news going into the game. There isn't really that much in terms of clear indication of who is and isn't available in terms of the players that have picked up injuries or are currently dealing with them at the moment. Lovren is the main one I'm thinking of because he's sat out the last couple of games, and obviously with Joe Gomez unavailable, he's probably the first choice partner to Virgil van Dijk in that defence. Obviously the two of them did so incredibly well as a centre-back partnership in the Champions League run last year. However, we haven't had any word yet on whether he has recovered from the concussion. Apparently that's what's keeping him out at the moment. So I think we'll find out a lot more about that in Jurgen Klopp's press conference tomorrow. But given that we haven't really heard anything about him being ruled out completely, and there wasn't really anything said after the Bournemouth game about how close he was to coming back to fitness, as an optimist, I hold a lot of hope that Dejan Lovren will be available, at least in some capacity, for Liverpool in this game. But until Jurgen Klopp's press conference tomorrow, probably afternoon, I guess it'll be, we won't really know for sure. Aside from that, I think because of the rotation that we did over the last two games, Jurgen Klopp essentially put that policy into place so that we had every single player to choose from that we possibly could in this game, because I think this game and the Man United ones, we can't really afford to rotate. There are plenty of other games in December where we can afford to maybe draft out our first choice forwards, bring in Alberto Moreno or like some midfielders who maybe don't get as many games, and switch everything up and stuff like that. But I think for this game and for the Man United game, we just have to play our best possible 11, and I think that's why Klopp rested so many players against Burnley, why he did a little bit of rotation in the Bournemouth game as well. And I think it's so important that that Bournemouth game was won with about half an hour to go, because if that had been a total slog, if the players had had to leave their heart and soul and blood and thunder out on that pitch on Saturday afternoon, then Klopp could have had a bit of a dilemma in terms of who he thinks is fit enough to play for this game. But I think because of the rotation, everyone who isn't carrying an injury is probably going to be available to start and play the full 90 minutes, possibly, in this game. So the starting 11 that I think he's going to put out, of course, Alisson Becker in goal. We are going to need a fantastic game from him, simply because Napoli are a good side. They're probably going to create chances regardless of how good our defence is in this game, regardless of who plays in that back four. So I think Alisson will need to be called into action a couple of times. And as I said at the top of the video, a Napoli goal really could send things pear-shaped. 2 Napoli goals and we have to score 4 to qualify, which is absolutely mad. So it's going to be so important that Alisson brings his A game, because I'm sure at some point he is going to have to make some form of big save that keeps Liverpool in the tie. I could be wrong. Napoli could play poorly. Our defence could have an incredible game and we could walk all over them. But the way I see it, he is going to be called into action at least a couple of times in this match. And to be honest, I think he can rise to the occasion. As we've seen over the last few games, he is in absolutely sparkling form at the moment, and I'd possibly even back him for yet another clean sheet in a Liverpool shirt. So the centre-back pairing, of course, Van Dijk, barring any abhorrent injuries that take place between now and Tuesday night, will be one of the centre-backs. And I think alongside him, provided he's fit, and like I said, we haven't really heard anything otherwise, and the optimist in me says that is good news rather than bad news, suggests that I think Lovren will probably partner him. Now, if he isn't available, Matip will, of course, partner him, and that will be an incredibly interesting situation, because Matip hasn't really been put in any high-pressure situations so far this season. Most of the games he's played have been against the sort of lower league sides, where it's mainly been about just using his passing range to try and get the best out of the team going forward. This would represent his first big test of the season, and one that hopefully he would pass, because his form has been a little bit patchy over the last year or so in a Liverpool shirt. But if not, if Lovren is available, then I think he absolutely has to start this game, because also Joel Matip has played 2 games in a row, midweek and weekend, and given how little football he's played earlier on in the season, I think it only makes sense that you'd give him a little bit of a rest if you have the opportunity. And then the full-backs, again going absolutely full strength. Trent Alexander-Arnold on the right-hand side, and then Andrew Robertson on the left-hand side. 2 fantastic players. One player in there, in Trent, who I think if anyone's going to score the Stevie PG style goal that sends us through to the knockout stages. I don't think there's a single Liverpool fan out there who wouldn't want it to be Trent Alexander-Arnold. That would be absolutely phenomenal, and I think we'd all love to see it. So he obviously has to start the game. I think he is the kind of player who, especially on European nights, because he was raised on that kind of thing as a kid supporting Liverpool, he just gives that extra 10% in these games. We saw it against Roma last season, against Man City last season, in the final as well. He knows what these kind of games mean, and I'm sure he will have another absolutely fantastic performance under his belt after the full 90 minutes on Tuesday night. And then I think we're going to go for the 4-2-3-1. I think the 4-3-3 hasn't really worked so far this season, and while we have used it in the big games to try and shore up the midfield, it has essentially nullified the attack. So I think we go with the 4-2-3-1 simply because, like I said, if things do go pear-shaped, we may have to score 3 or even 4 goals to qualify. So we need our forwards to be firing on all cylinders, and we need to give them absolutely everything to make that possible. And I think that 4-2-3-1 formation is our best possible bet of doing that. So I think the midfield too, I think it has to be Gini Wijnaldum and Fabinho. They have been our best midfield setup so far this season, and there's a shout for maybe trying to work Keita in there somewhere because he has been so fantastic, but I just think he's played 2 games in a row like Joel Matip after having not really played that much earlier on in the season, so it probably makes sense to rest him here. And also there are still question marks about where exactly he fits in, especially if we play that 4-2-3-1 formation, and of course having him as a potential impact sub available off the bench if things aren't going well is such a great weapon for Liverpool to have in their arsenal. So I think Gini Wijnaldum and Fabinho absolutely have to start as the midfield pairing for this game. Ahead of them, I think it's going to be full strength. I think it's going to be Shaqiri, even though he has started the last 2 games and went pretty much the full 90 minutes in both of them. So there's a potential argument that he is fatigued there. And if Jurgen Klopp agrees, then I can see us maybe bringing in Naby Keita there. Maybe, I don't know, shifting Mane out to the right or something like that and playing Naby Keita in that left mid role that he played against Bournemouth. And, you know, that will probably work. That will probably be fine. But in the best case scenario, if Shaqiri is available and fit, then I'd definitely play him from the start in this game because he just gets so much out of those other attacking players. So I put Shaqiri out on the right, Firmino down the middle as the number 10, Sadio Mane back from his injury after a little cameo appearance against Bournemouth as well as the left mid, and then Mohamed Salah, Liverpool's hat-trick hero, down the middle to try and spearhead us through to the knockout stages of the Champions League. So taking a little look at Napoli, form-wise, they've actually been pretty solid so far this season, given that we haven't really heard anyone waxing lyrical about them and saying they're as good as they were under Sarri last season. You only have to look at the Serie A table where they've got, I think, 11 wins, 2 draws and just 2 defeats to realise they are having a pretty good season so far, and they are, of course, currently, before this game, top of the Champions League table as well, and crucially have proved themselves capable of getting results away from home against PSG. Those 2 games against PSG that we kind of hoped would help us through to the knockout stages, with both of them kind of cutting each other's throats and us thinking, well, we'll get 6 points against Red Star. I won't dwell on that anymore. We all know how that turned out. Pardon me. But Napoli have proved that they are capable of getting big results away from home in tough grounds to play, because we all know how difficult it was at the Parc des Princes to get a result. Liverpool didn't even get a point out of that game, and Napoli managed to emerge with a result from that game. So they've proved that they are capable of doing it away from home in Europe as well as at home. And I think the fact that they go into this game with a very different mindset to Liverpool, the fact they go in and for them it isn't like a do or die, we've got to win, we've got to score goals. For them it is simply a draw or a win guarantees us qualification. For them it's probably more about actually trying to top the group rather than trying to like avoid defeat and just scrape through like we're trying to do. And I think that will play a lot into how Napoli set up for this game, because I think they are a strong defensive unit. I think this whole idea of Italian teams being impossible to attack against is a little bit archaic, but I think in their case it's probably true. We saw that when we played against them at the Stadio San Paolo. Our attack, even though it was of course misfiring that day, just had no way possibly of breaking them down throughout the whole game. They've got Koulibaly, who is an absolutely fantastic centre-back as well, and I think the battle between him and Mohamed Salah will be absolutely key, because I'm expecting Salah to play down the centre rather than coming in off the right. I think that's probably the right thing to do, simply because what we saw, I think, at the Stadio San Paolo and even in the pre-season game as well, was that he was up against the fullback, and as soon as he managed to beat the fullback, Koulibaly was there to just kind of essentially double up on him and pick up any pieces that the fullback had left behind. So I think it's important that he just tries to isolate Koulibaly, that he tries to turn that into a one-on-one, because Koulibaly's a great defender and he will probably have a very solid game up against Mo Salah. But Salah proved against Bournemouth that he relishes these challenges in the 1v1s against the centre-backs. It's something that I think a lot of people have been thinking about in terms of his credentials as a centre-forward and whether or not he can make it as a number 9, because that's such an important part of the play, is being able to take on big burly centre-backs. Steve Cook was one of those for Bournemouth. Obviously, he's nowhere near Koulibaly's standard, but Salah proved that he's got the mentality to take that kind of situation on. He's got the physicality to take that situation on, and we all know that he's got the incredible footballing skill to go with it. So I think that is going to be such a crucial battle, because Napoli will be defensive. They've also got Carlo Ancelotti as their manager, who's capable of organising a team very well, and he will know exactly what he needs to do to try and get the result that would see Napoli through. And like I said, they will look to defend. It's entirely possible, as much as we talk about all these permutations of if they score we have to win by 2 and stuff like that, that if Liverpool are going to go through, their best bet might actually just be that 1-0 win, where one moment of quality gets us the goal, and then we make sure we don't make any mistakes at the other end. But like I said, that battle between Salah and Koulibaly is going to be so key, and I think if one player is capable of taking this Liverpool side through to the knockouts in this high pressure scenario, then it has to be Mohamed Salah. He did it last season in the Champions League knockouts, and I think if anyone's going to do it, it's going to be him. So it is, of course, a massive game. It's under the lights. It's a European night. It's do or die. It is the perfect stage. It is set perfectly for someone to come up and have their Steven Gerrard moment, for someone to write themselves into Anfield folklore. Who do you want it to be? You let me know that. I want to know. I would like it to be Trent Alexander-Arnold. I want it to be a 30-yard free kick from him that he absolutely whams in off the crossbar. But I'm sure all of you have other opinions as well. Who do you want to be Liverpool's hero in this game? Let me know down in the comments below. Apart from that, thank you very much for watching this video. I'll be back on Tuesday, of course, with post-match reaction. Fingers crossed from outside the ground if I get those tickets, but if not, the usual place here it will be taking place from. But apart from that, don't forget to like this video if you enjoyed it, comment down below with your ideal match winner player thingy. Apart from that, don't forget to hit that subscribe button there if you're new around here. Check out some of the other videos that have been out on the channel over the past few days as well. Don't forget to follow at LFC Focus TV on Twitter, and I'll see you on Tuesday night. Until then, bye for now.